All right, let's jump right in. We're tackling a massive idea today, one that gets right down to the most fundamental question you can ask: what is reality? We're going to be drawing from Dominic Garlick's work, Ontologics, to explore this idea that our entire understanding of existence has, in a way, been put in chains, and it offers a pretty radical key to unlock it.
You know, the ancient Greeks started their whole philosophical journey in wonder, asking, what is being? But the source we're digging into today flips that script completely. It doesn't start with a question, it starts with a declaration of who being is. And that right there is the massive shift we're about to unpack. So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at the problem, this idea of a queen in chains. Then we'll get into the core conflict, knowing versus being. We'll trace a quick history of how we got into this mess, introduce a really radical idea from a logician, define the proposed solution, this thing called ontologics, and then finally, we'll talk about why any of this actually matters in the real world. For centuries, theology wasn't just another subject, it was called the queen of the sciences. It was seen as the ultimate framework for making sense of everything. But the argument here is that today, that queen is no longer on her throne. She's in chains, a prisoner to the way we think now.
This prison has a name: epistemological captivity. Think about it like this. Christian thought has been forced to spend all its energy arguing about how we can know things. It's constantly on trial, having to defend its very right to speak in the court of human reason. It's been so busy justifying itself that it's forgotten its main job: to boldly declare what is real.
Okay, so this brings us right to the heart of the matter, to this philosophical tug of war between two very different ways of looking at the world.
On one side, you've got epistemology. That's the study of knowledge. It is obsessed with one question: how can we know? But on the other side, you've got ontology. That's the study of being, of reality itself. And it asks a much bigger, much more foundational question: what is real? The whole argument is that we've gotten so completely bogged down in the first question, we've forgotten the second one even exists.
And this metaphor just nails it. It's like we've become a culture that's totally obsessed with staring at the map, arguing about the lines, the symbols, the legend, all the methods of knowing. And we've completely forgotten to actually look up and experience the territory, reality itself.
So, how in the world did we get stuck in this prison of our own minds? Well, the source traces a path through a few key philosophical game changers.
It really starts gaining steam with thinkers like Descartes, who put human thought right at the center of everything. Then came Kant, who basically built a wall around our minds, arguing that things like God were fundamentally beyond what we could ever know. Now, in the 20th century, guys like Van Til and Bonson launched this brilliant counterattack. But, and this is the key point, even they were still fighting on the enemy's turf. Their arguments were all about why God is necessary for knowledge, not why God is necessary for existence itself.
Bonson's critique was absolutely razor sharp, though. He basically said that anyone who rejects the Christian worldview still has to sneak into its warehouse and steal concepts like universal logic or objective morality just to make a coherent sentence. They're using tools they claim don't even exist, which is a massive contradiction. So, into this whole epistemological mess steps a logician, a guy named Gordon H. Clark, and he offered a totally radical way out of the whole debate. Clark's idea just completely reframes the entire conversation. See, we've all been treating logic like it's this neutral, universal tool that anybody can just pick up and use, right? But Clark asks a simple question. What if it's not? What if logic itself is part of the territory, not just a tool for reading the map? And here it is, the absolute linchpin of his argument. Clark said that the laws of logic, like A cannot be non-A, aren't just handy rules we invented for a good debate. He claimed they are a direct reflection of God's own mind, of his perfectly consistent nature. So to violate logic isn't just to be wrong, it's to try and step outside of reality itself. And this leads to his most shocking conclusion. If logic is the structure of God's mind, then to deny God isn't just an intellectual mistake. It is, in his words, ontological suicide. It's a rebellion against the very fabric of your own being, which, in his view, is being held together by the very God you're trying to deny.
So, this brings us to the solution that's proposed in the source, a whole new framework that's built on Clark's big idea. It's a new word for a very old concept: ontologics.
So what is ontologics? Well, in a nutshell, it's the logic of being. It stops asking, how can we know? And it starts with the bold declaration that reality, all of it, the whole shebang, is grounded in the Logos, the divine word. It's about applying a God-centered worldview not just to how we think, but to the very nature of what it means to exist. And it's built on three core ideas. First, the revelational thesis. God's word doesn't just describe reality, it actually defines reality. Second, the logocentric thesis. Logic isn't our invention. It's the structural grammar of God's own mind. And third, the covenantal thesis. Being isn't just a bunch of static stuff. It's a dynamic, relational thing held together by God's promises. Now, you might be thinking, okay, this is some pretty heavy, abstract philosophy. And you're right. But the argument is that what we fundamentally believe about what is real, our ontology, shapes every single thing about our lives and our society. The stakes really couldn't be higher. Just look at this breakdown. It makes it super clear. If your starting point is materialism, that only matter exists, you eventually land in a world where your thoughts are just an illusion and life has no built-in dignity. Or if you start with postmodern relativism, that reality is just made up by groups, then truth just becomes a tool for power, and justice is just about who tells the most convincing story. But if you start with a biblical ontology, where a good God made a real good world, well then the body matters, truth is real and you can know it, and justice is objective because it's based on God's character. And as Garlick puts it so powerfully, when a culture loses its ontological bearings, it loses its humanity. Our deep-down ideas about reality aren't just ideas. They either build or they destroy the worlds we live in. So, the crucial point that we're left with is this. What is your foundational belief about what's real? Because whatever that belief is, whether you think about it or not, it is actively shaping the world that you and everyone around you is building every single day. And that really leaves us with the ultimate contrast, doesn't it? One worldview, born from human reason, stands up and proudly declares, I think, therefore I am. But the other worldview, grounded in revelation, humbly listens and hears a very different voice declare, I am, therefore you are. And that right there changes absolutely everything.